today I'm speaking about our baby. So here's my baby. I don't know if you can see him. This is my baby Moses. I'm sorry, he's got a blonde tuft. He should be Hebrew. He should be dark. And but here he is. Hello. And he's wrapped in a Hebrew shroud, my prayer shroud. Look at that. It's just to make sure. So this is Moses, as you can guess, before he's putting the bulrushes in his little ark, in his little basket. So I'm going to read to you from Exodus 2, and then get into the word. Now, a man of the tribe of Levi married a Levite woman, and she became pregnant and gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, that means a favoured child, there was something about this child that was different. And she'd already had 2 children, remember. She knew there was something different. She hid the child for 3 months. But when she couldn't hide him any longer, she took this papyrus basket and she coated it with tar and put it in the water among the reeds in the bank of the Nile. And his sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. Then Pharaoh's daughter went down to the Nile to bathe, and her attendants were walking along the riverbank. And she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her female slaves to get it. And she opened it and she saw the baby, and he was crying, and she felt sorry for him. And she went, "This is one of the Hebrew babies." So she took this baby and adopted this baby as her own, and she called him Moses. And because it means that I drew him out of the water. Now, he was a baby that was loved. It was conceived by a Jewish family and loved by this family, but it was under threat of its life because Pharaoh at that time, he'd ordered that all the baby boys be killed and thrown into the Nile. So when this woman put her baby into the water, it was a heartbreaking moment. This wasn't just something done lightly. She had hid this baby for 3 months to keep it alive. And now she had to let go of this baby. And so when she lowered it into the water, she put it into the arms of Jesus, or well, God at that time. And she put it into the arms of God. She said, "Please take care of this baby. I know there's something about this baby that's favoured." So she put the baby into the water. You see, this baby had been hidden for 3 months. She'd hidden it. It said, I don't know if it's Jewish myth or what, but it's hidden in the rafters of a house and hanging so that it couldn't be seen until it was 3 months. And you can't, it's hard to hide a 3-month-old baby. When it was mine, they were like, you know. And so there are times when God hides us, and it's for our benefit. You might be sitting there thinking, I've done this for God, I've done that. It just seems nothing goes in my favour. God's not, you know, I don't seem to have many benefits from this. But God hides us for our own safety, because if we came out too soon, the enemy could take us out.
Yeah, that's true.
If he'd have been exposed any time before then, the Pharaoh would have had him in the Nile. That would have been it. Your vision, you can have a vision in your heart for a long time and it's hidden there. A dream, something you want, something you think God's given you, and you think, is this ever going to happen? But God's saying, if this comes out a day too soon, the enemy can take it out. It's interesting, but he doesn't put us on display immediately for his purposes. He knows if he elevates us, the enemy will see us and he will want to target us. So he waits until it's safe to show us off. Moses was hidden for 3 months and he had a name change. It's not recorded because I have studied this. I really wanted to know what his parents called him, but you can't find it. The Jews have these different names that they believe was given to him, but there's nothing substantial, there's nothing recorded. But it did say that Pharaoh's daughter named him Moses. He had a name change. Often God changes our names, doesn't he? He changes people in the Bible's names for a purpose, for a time. I believe, I'd say the prophetic side of this word, God says, listen, I'm hiding you for your own safety, because when I set you out there, you're going to bless a lot of people. And you need to be safe. I prophesied over a year ago And I had a bow and arrow, and I said, God's going to shoot you out. You're hidden in his quiver. He's hiding you for a season. This is your time to be shot out. This is your time. God's had you in the quiver, hiding you. And I can tell you, there comes a time when you're no longer hidden. You get too big in the spirit. It isn't about numbers, it's about in the spirit. And the presence of God in this place is getting too big to be hid. And God has to enlarge. I don't know if you know in the Old Testament that Obed-Edom, he was a man of God. And he loved God, him and his family. And they had to put the Ark of God, which, where God's presence was in those days. He's everywhere, but then he used to be on the Ark of the Covenant. And they said, we need to put this place safe. So they put it in this man's house for 3 months. It was hidden in Obed-Edom's house. The presence of God was in his house. And what happened? At the end of 3 months, everything in that man's house was blessed. His wife, his family, his kids, his dog, his cat, his finances, the fields, everything. They said everything. So what happened? Everyone started to talk about it. It got too big. The presence of God couldn't be hidden there anymore. So everyone started talking about it. And it said it went far and wide, the news of Obed-Edom. Do you know what? This man's housing the presence of God. And he's so blessed. Everything in his life's blessed. So the king said, okay, we'll have some of that. Went and got the Ark of the Covenant, he said, we need the presence of God in Jerusalem so everyone can be blessed. And you see, you can't hide the presence of God too long before something explodes. You might explode, but when I was just a mum, I had no position in the church. I had nothing, nowhere. Hardly anyone knew me outside of church people. But I started to house the presence of God in my living room. And that's all I did, every day, hours. And when I could, I had like 4 kids at home, whatever was how many was there at the time. I had, a life just like yours. But I took time out for the presence of God, not for any reward except to be with him. I needed him in my life. I needed his presence in my home and my family. But do you know what? Certainly after 3 months, I was like Moses. You couldn't hide the presence of God in my house anymore. It couldn't be hid. I couldn't be hid. And no one knew about me. I thought, well, God can't use me. He can't put me anywhere. I think I must have spoken twice publicly ever in a church and never got asked again, so I don't know what that meant. And but I was like Obed-Edom. Give a few months in the presence of God. And I got a phone call. Would you come and speak? It was a hilarious dream when you think about it. Can you come and speak at a conference in London? I'm like, I lived in the north of England. No one knew me. How could they be asking me? And it was in an afternoon when I had been hours in the presence of God, just enjoying him in the lounge. And God said, I'm opening the gates for you now. And I didn't know what that meant. But about an hour later, I got a phone call. From that day, I was not hidden anymore. From that day. But if God had released me a day before then, I think the enemy would have definitely taken me out. I was not ready. But his presence can't be hidden. You want to try it, I'm telling you, it cannot be hidden for long. Like Moses, they couldn't hide this baby any longer. He was a big part of God's plan. And it was a man called Brother Lawrence, and it's called The Practice of the Presence of God. This man was a humble monk, and before he became a monk, he got this job in this stately home. I believe, I could be wrong, you read different things, but this is the story I read. But he was so clumsy, he kept breaking things. And this stately home so near, and he said, I'm terrible at this job, I'm going to have to leave, unless he got fired, I don't know. And he left, and he said, I'm sorry, God, I've really let you down. So what I'm going to do is, he went to Paris and joined this monastery, and he said, I'm just going to spend time with you, and I'm going to, if I'm going to suffer, let me suffer, because I don't deserve anything better, I've failed in life. And so he went and he started spending time with God in his room, in his room in the monastery. And he said a terrible thing happened. He started to get so blessed. He was so happy. He was like, you shouldn't be doing this, God. I'm enjoying this so much. I shouldn't be enjoying this. I shouldn't be enjoying your presence. This should be a penance for me. And then he started to say, blessing just kept coming to him. And he was like, but this isn't the reason I was doing this. And then he had all these hours with God and just loved God. What he said, I forgot all about the creeds and everything we have to read off papers. And I just started to dwell in the presence of God. And then they said, right, you've had long enough. We're going to put you to work now. And he had to go and work in the kitchen. He said to God, what am I going to do? I'm going to leave you. I've got to leave you and go and work in the kitchen. God said, who are you going to leave? I'm coming with you. You're going to practice my presence in the kitchen like you do in your room. And he took God's presence into the kitchen, and every act he did, whether it was a wash a dish, was for God and in God and for God. And everyone that he come across, whether they liked him or not, he blessed and just loved because God was there. This presence of God that he had in his room couldn't be hidden any longer. This man became so well known that the people in the monastery started coming to him. His leaders, he could have become a high bishop or a priest. He said, I don't want any title. I'm not here for a title. I'm here for God's presence. And I thought of all the people in that monastery that were striving for titles. Please put me up there. Please what am I going to be called if I do this job in the church? You know. Do you know any of them? I don't. None of them have been remembered. This man said, don't give me any name. I'm here for the presence of God. He was one of the greatest influences, it says, of the 17th century. This book, this little book that is written of his sayings of the presence of God, is still being reprinted around the world in so many countries, changing lives. It's still going on. You see, God's presence won't be hidden. God's presence in your life is the greatest legacy you can leave in this life. He's still affecting people. If you feel hidden, believe me, it'll be for a season. If you say, my ways are hidden from the Lord, he doesn't know what I'm going through. He doesn't know, nobody knows who I am. What am I doing for God? Believe me, keep in the presence of God, that will change. That will all change. He's no respecter of persons. Where his presence goes, expansion goes, increase. You just cannot stay in the presence of God and something not happen. It's impossible. Yeah. It's time to let the baby go. Oh, it's time to let go of the baby. I hate this. Do you know, this is just as much for me as for you because, as you know, we birthed here. I can remember the labour pains for Grace Church. Yes, all mums know. No, we won't talk about labour pains this morning. But it's time to let our baby go, to put him down into the water, to trust him with God. You know, whenever God gets ready to move in our lives and he wants us to take us on to the next level, the next blessing, there has to be a letting go of something. Like Colin was saying about letting go. He'll always ask you to let go of something. We can't go to the next level while we're holding our baby so tightly. You know, God, you can't have my baby. This is dear to me. You know, I can't let go of this. I've had so many people say to me for different reasons, I couldn't go to the mission field because, no, my kids, they might get hurt or they might get this or that. I couldn't do it. I'm like, okay, or other people, no, I couldn't speak. It'd mean that, I'd have to look daft or people might not like me. Okay, there will have to be a letting go of your baby if you want to move on with God. That's how it is. I wish it wasn't. My life would have been a lot easier. But my whole Christian life gives testimony that God has blessed me. He's led me on. He's took me from glory to glory. But that at every single stage, I've had to let go of my baby. Something that has been dear to my heart. Sometimes I feel like it's broken my heart. But that shouldn't be that. I think that was something wrong in me. But it feels like your heart's breaking. You know, when she let go of Moses, I felt that mother's heart. She doesn't want to let go of her child, even to Pharaoh's daughter who could give him everything she couldn't. She had God, she knew that. She was letting her child go to a foreign culture where there was the occult, where everything she didn't believe in. And she had to trust God and let her baby go. I've had to, when God first asked us to move, I've said all these different things. Don't ever tell God what you won't do, because it's just dangerous. I said, well, I will never move away from my mum and dad, because I just love my mum and dad. So what does he say? I want you to move to Scotland away from your mum and dad. And I'm like, no, not my mum and dad. But I knew that he had a purpose and a plan for us in Scotland the first time when we had young children. So we moved. And then he said, he called us to the mission field. I knew I was going to be a missionary in Asia. But when it came to it, and I was like, God's going to use me. He's sending me to the mission field. I had to put Luke in a basket and leave him with God. I left him with my mum, which was, the best thing I could have. But even so, I went through a mourning. I went through the grieving like his mum would, and Moses' mother. My heart was broken. I said, I will never be one of these missionaries that leave their children behind. And I had to leave Luke. It was heartbreaking. And I've had to give up at the call of God, because I want God's call to be fulfilled in my life, and because I want God more than anything else in my life. I've had to give up homes that David, bless him, has built, renovated, and I've had to give up homes, my country, my family, everything that I never thought that I'd be asked to separate with. You might not be asked that, but you'll have a baby somewhere that God's asking you to release to him. Some people can't give up their baby for God. They're like, no, I can't trust you with this. And they never move on and fulfill the purposes of God in their life, which is so sad, because God's no man debtor. I can stand here and say, I gave up this for God, and I gave up. He's standing here saying, yeah, and what did I bless you with? This and this and this and this. And there are still eternal rewards. So I'm never outdone. I'm never shortchanged by God. But I want to ask you, what's stopping you from God's call in your life, from entering that next season that God wants to bless you in? And are you willing to let go of your finances? God tests us all with our finances. Do you tithe to the church, or is it, oh no, I need my baby? No, I love God, but let him keep his, business out of my business, sort of thing. And, to break through into financial blessing, I didn't know I was going to break through into financial blessing, but when I did, it was when God asked me to give up my baby, the little tiny bit of savings I had that took me ages to save, and give it to him. And when I released that and put that into the water, he started to bless me. And I can't tell you, there's always a letting go of something that's dear to you for God to bless you. And God might be asking you to give up your reputation to share the gospel. He might be asking you to put whatever's dear to you. But there will be a letting go of something in a season to bring the next blessing of God that's going to be blessed for you. You probably know Luke, when God asked Luke to give up his business, it was successful. He was doing well financially. It was really going well. And then one day God said, would you be willing to let go of the baby for my purposes? Luke had no idea, one, how he was going to get paid, two, what God meant, what he exactly wanted. But he stepped out, and God's been faithful every single day. Because when one door closes, God always opens a bigger one. When you're in compliance with God. Yeah. So some of you have to give up fear. When I stepped out and God wanted me to speak, I had to give up the fear of man. Because he said to me, for years he said, I can't use you, you've got the fear of man. If you have the fear of man, you probably want the praise of man as well. And you're going to have to give that up, because some will like you, some won't. Some will say, that's good word, what are you doing up there? So I had to let that baby go, that fear that I'd nursed, and said, I can't do it, I will never speak, so that God could use me. And so that people can be blessed. It's a bigger picture. Yeah. You might have to give up fear. When God called us to Cambodia, when God first called us out, to Scotland, I got right to the week that we were moving, and the fear gripped me so much. And this happens to me all the time. When I'm moving out, I have to deal with the fear. But the fear gripped me so much, we went to a goodbye meal with our pastor and his wife. And he said, you know, what's the matter, Pauline? What's troubling you? And I said, I can't do it. I know everyone said goodbye, and everyone's like, oh, they're going off to Bible college. I can't do it. I cannot leave my parents. I can't leave my parents not saved. And so he said, look, it's just fear, and the enemy doesn't want you to step out. Let's pray. He prayed, that fear went immediately, and I went home. Do you know, I was in so much fear. I was 19, and I was sleeping in the front room with my mum because I got so fearful of leaving her. Not leaving her like I'm not cared for, because she wasn't a Christian, and I didn't want to leave the presence of God to go out their house. And, you know, I went, and within months, my mum and dad were saved, weren't they? Somebody had come into my house, a man I didn't know, shared the gospel, and they got saved. But you see, you have to release first your baby, then God blesses. So he's like, I don't need you in your house to get your mum and dad saved. I need you to be obedient and let go of the baby, and then I'll save your mum and dad. Don't worry about that. So that was letting go. So if any of you, some of you, I tell you, the enemy intimidates us when God calls us and says, oh, well, what about this, what about that? Sometimes he uses sickness. Oh, you can't do this because you're too old, you're too young, or you're too sick, or you've got this situation going on. Don't believe it. If God calls you, he'll override that. Yeah. As long as we let our baby go, our fears go, don't even worry. God will uphold you if you feel like you're dealing with issues. He'll sort them out as you go. So Moses was hidden, then he was let go of, and then we see the bigger picture. You see, his mum and dad were in their house praying and crying out to God, God, send us a deliverer. God, send us a deliverer. How do I know? Because every household was crying out. It said they were crying out in their homes, God, send a deliverer. Pharaoh's going to kill us. He's got us in slavery. He wants to annihilate us. God, help us. And they were crying out. And his mum and dad didn't know that the deliverer was in their house, because Moses was the chosen deliverer for the people of Israel. So they're crying out, not knowing God's already answered their prayer. And it's actually, the answer to their prayer is in their house, in the front room. You know, every time they heard the baby cry, and they're like, shh, we don't want you killed. God's saying, actually, they won't kill him. He's the deliverer, you know, of Israel. And you don't know, in your situation, you're crying out to God for this, that, or the other, that God's got this bigger picture that he's already working out for you in your life. That if you can submit and release whatever that is to God, that he's going to turn around in such a big way for you, because God's plan wasn't to save the baby Moses and to bless him in the palace. It was to save a whole nation. That child that is troubling you, that person in your family you think will never get saved, God will never use, is the very one that God might use to turn your whole family around, even a nation around. Do not limit God. It's never what we think with God. His ways are not our ways. His thoughts, he doesn't think like us, thank goodness. And his plan for you and for us are so much bigger than we could ever imagine, perceive, or think about. But we have to see that in those moments that are the most difficult in our life, that are the most heartbreaking in our lives, that are the most traumatic, are the very times that he's using that thing to bring about a deliverance that's greater than anything we can think or imagine. And if we can get a hold of that, those things that are troubling us now won't look as big, they won't look as painful. If Moses' mum and dad had known, he's going to be given back to us, he's going to lead, he's going to be the most well-known person in this land, in the world one day. He's going to be leading us out, not just the mum, dad, but the whole nation out. They might not have cried so much. They might not have been as heartbreaking. It was still hard losing your child. But there would have been something in them. And I want to tell you now, there isn't anything in your life too big for God to handle and not turn around for you. Just like the testimonies we heard, God turning these situations around for good. As long as we're willing to let go of the baby when God asks us to. God never wanted to take their son. I mean, that was obviously Pharaoh's doing. He wanted to make a way for them to be free. When God asks you to let go of something, you will find in the days ahead that very thing you let go of will come round and bless you in such a big way that you're like, oh my goodness, I never saw this. Have you ever helped someone and got rewarded years later? Or someone said, thank you for that thing you did, and it comes back on you. The thing you do today, you do not know that for God, how it's going to come back and hit you in the days ahead. When I put Luke in that basket and I released Luke to God, I had no idea. I didn't know. I thought my dad at that point wasn't a Christian. I just thought, what am I releasing Luke to God? I won't be there. He could be getting up to anything. Actually, he was, but God redeemed that. But I had to put him in God's hands. I had no idea that so many years later that Luke and I would be working together, that God would use us in this way. When I put that baby in that basket, I had no idea that God's plans for him, for me, were so much greater. I didn't know what was going to happen. You know, all the things you think, all the fears you can have. God's plan is always bigger than you can see right now. You might be asking God, help me, let me be used in the church. And God's saying, I won't actually use you in the nation or globally. You never know. And you never know how big God's plan is. Yeah. I just want to say that many of you will be coming out of hiding. Grace Church is coming out of hiding. You're coming out the quiver. Whatever his purpose is, it's bigger. It's always bigger. It's always for his glory. It's always for his praise. So you don't have to worry. You don't have to be fearful because it's about him. It's about his name. I love the worship today was heavenly. That's all I can say, heavenly. Thank you, Gary and Danica. It was all about his name. And you don't have to worry about your name because it's his name you've got to be worried about. And his name will always be exalted.
And look upon the promise of a new Jerusalem. It's gonna be a struggle, but remember it was won when Jesus died at Calvary and cried, it is done. So to the unbeliever, here's a message from the one who made the earth, the heavens, and the whole of creation.